a Mahomes meltdown, one game that changed the entire playoff picture, and the worst game of the year. All that and more because it's time for Sunday Night Blitz. You guys know the deal at this point. Yahoo Sports NFL betting extraordinaire. He's the expert. He's the brilliant one. Frank Schwab. I'm Jason Fitz, hanging out with you. It is time for Sunday Night Blitz. And Frank, we got a lot to get into because we watched some huge meltdowns. We saw some big games. The entire NFC looks wildly different. It was a crazy day across the NFL.
Very true. A lot to talk about. Patrick Mahomes is upset. The Eagles are probably upset. But Jason Fitz, you are probably the most upset of all. Let me set this up. My good friend here on the other side of the microphone, obviously big Raiders fan, was at the game today. And I've always thought, what's the worst experience you could have as a fan? I think it might be now traveling to see your team play, watching that team and its opponent go 58 minutes without a point, and then losing that game 3-0 at the end of it. I want to know, Jason Fitz, because you are one of the few people now, that you and 70,000 other friends, that can speak to the experience. How miserable was it being at a 3-0 NFL football game?
Let me paint you a picture here, Frank.
Sure.
My alarm went off at 3 a.m. Eastern time today because I had to get up in time. I was going to fly out yesterday. But because of the in-season tournament and the national finals rodeo, hotel rooms were like $1,000. So I was like, I'm not flying out the night before. I'll fly out the morning of. It'll be fine. So I fly out the morning of. I get here. I land. I go straight to the hotel so I can drop my things off, only to find out nothing is ready at the hotel. And then I have to go across. It takes forever to get the Uber that takes me then over to the stadium where I have to walk through. There's a violent fight in front of me as everybody's trying to figure it out. I get all the way around to the stadium. I'm lucky enough. I'm one of the, I will say it's a first world problem. I get a media credential, so at least I didn't have to pay for the ticket, right? I go all the way into the stadium, and then I sit there, Frank. I sit there surrounded by professionals all over the place. I got Tim Brown sitting next to me. I got Eric Allen sitting over next to me, and we're just sitting there dumbfounded while I am watching the worst football game I've ever seen in my life. I have never once felt like a game was out of reach when the score was still nothing. Like when you reach the point where you only get to the red zone once throughout the course. Like the Raiders have a really good kicker. Really good kicker. Really good kicker. He opened the second half for us. A nice kick there. That's the only time his foot touched the ball. Like that's it. You didn't even get in field goal range. What in the did I just watch with that, Frank? I'm telling you, 3-0 and a loss. That is the way. Like, I knew my playoff hopes would die at some point this year. I didn't know it'd be a swift kick to the no-no places in the form of a 3-0 loss to the Vikings.
Couple things, as I am one time zone over from you, watching it, lovely Buffalo Wild Wings. There's other games going on. Bills Chiefs going on. I got to write about this game. Joey Galino, our NFL editor, says you're writing a gamer off this. I was focused on the Vikings Raiders. You know why? Because it was such a train wreck. I could not turn away. I had to watch this game. And at some point, I wonder if you did too. Do you just start rooting for a 0-0 tie just because it hasn't happened since 1943? Like, I was like, this game deserves to be a 0-0 tie. I was actually bummed out when Greg Joseph hit the one score, the field goal in the game.
Yes, 100%. I said midway through the second quarter, I said, man, let's just go for the 0-0 tie, because you could tell nobody was going to score throughout the course of the game. At least then you say, hey, I saw history. And by the way, first time in Raiders franchise history that they went into a game in the fourth quarter tied 0-0. You think about the length of time. Like you never see this sort of a game. And there's a line for me because there were some great defensive moments by both sides. But let's be honest, there was like this line between good defense and just abysmal, atrocious, terrible offense. I know we're starting this whole show with the worst game of the entire. We never do that.
We'll get better, folks. We'll get to better games, folks. Real quick, just to break down this game so we can move on. Very interesting that they benched Josh Dobbs for Nick Mullins, and Mullins gave them a spark. Like I think. I don't know. I was watching, obviously, Eagles Cowboys. I don't know if Kevin O'Connell addressed this after the game. I don't think he did. I'd find it hard to believe Josh Dobbs starts next week for the Vikings. So this Vikings season just takes another crazy turn where they're going to have probably a quarterback change because Dobbs' wheels just fell off. It's hard to watch because he was so good. It's such a great story. And then all of a sudden that Bears game hit and he just turned into a pumpkin. I feel bad for him, but Mullins did give him something to work with. And I mean, they're still a playoff team right now. So it's very interesting going forward.
That's the key. They're still a playoff team. They got to get this quarterback situation figured out. Also, Justin Jefferson injured in this game. Madison injured in this game. I mean, there was just a bevy of injuries that happened. Of note, I will say for Raiders fans, Coach AP afterwards, when he was asked about what was going to be reviewed, he said, we're going to look at everything. He was even asked about what about offensive coaches, coordinators, play callers. He said, absolutely everything will be looked at and scrutinized. So could be even more changes coming for the Raiders as they play Thursday night in what is going to be the worst Thursday night game in the history of Thursday night football against the Chargers at this point without their starting quarterback. All right, let's get to actual good football that we saw here. And there's a lot to break down, but I want to start because I like to troll the entire world with the meltdown of Mahomes. Because here I am, you mentioned you're watching a bunch of games. I'm watching a bunch of games. I saw the offsides penalty and people are freaking out. Kadarius Toney lined up offsides. He was not, according to the Chiefs, warned by the officials. Nobody told him he needed to get back. It was called on a beautiful lateral play that resulted in a touchdown that would have likely won the game. But instead, because the offsides was called on the offense, very rare, all of a sudden that play didn't count. Of note, the NFL has already come out and said, look, that very play has been called 11 times this year. It was a point of emphasis for the league. So there is some point here, though. We saw Mahomes take I'll use a wrestling analogy, take a very heel turn here, because we're used to seeing Mahomes a good guy. He was absolutely livid with the officials on the field, off the field, at the podium.
This was a great game, and I'll get back to the game, but this was such a crazy moment. Yes. For one thing, I kind of get, we're going to warn you about it, but it doesn't give you could do this once per game and have a get out of jail free card. He lined up offsides. I don't even know how they could argue this. He was lined up offsides. Barely, maybe, but it happened. I don't think you could argue this. I don't think anybody who looks at that screenshot or the angle or whatever says he wasn't really offsides. I think he clearly was. He was. Not by much, but he was. So for Mahomes, my theory on this, I have a theory, is Mahomes is so fed up with his receivers, he can't show them up. He can't yell at them. He can't go in a press conference and rip them. But you know what he could do? He can have an absolute tantrum against the refs and just take out his frustration. I don't think that was really about that call. Was it unfortunate it happened right then and wiped out such an amazing play? Absolutely. Was he mad to lose a game at home? Of course. But I think that anger was basically his anger. Hey, Kadarius Toney, why is it always something with you? Why is it always Kadarius Toney? You could have told me before the game even started, hey, there's gonna be a dude lined up offsides and wipe out one of the greatest plays of the season. And I was, Kadarius Toney for sure. It's always something with Kadarius Toney, and none of the other guys are getting open. I think Mahomes just fed up. I think he's really frustrated, and it just came out that way. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but what do you think about that theory?
I love your theory because it makes sense. Control what you can control and go after who you can go after. It's going to cost him some money, but money means nothing at this point. That's an easier way to go, and it also prevents his guy from being a scapegoat. But I have to say this, and I have to say this loudly for everybody. Right now, Chiefs fans are all over social media convinced that there's some massive conspiracy theory against them because the refs don't give them calls. Again,
oh my God, of all the teams.
I know, this is what blows my mind. Every weekend, every single fan base has to go to social media and be like, oh, the refs have it out for my team. No, they don't. There are bad officials. There are bad calls. People make mistakes in the course of games. Yes, but there is not some great bias to keep one team out or put one team in. The NFL doesn't need that help. They're going to get their money. They're going to get their ratings. They're going to get their eyeballs. And certainly if they were going to try and job somebody over in this process, it would not be Patrick Mahomes, who is the face of the entire damn league at this point. So this constant need for officiating to be couched as a conspiracy really bothers me.
Yes. And on the flip side of that, the other 31 teams are the fan bases are all like, Patrick Mahomes' best friend is a ref because he gets every call. Well, you must be confused today because I didn't get one here. Didn't call Von Miller for offsides when it looked like he might have. I don't think he was offsides on that third down, but whatever. But also,
that stuff pisses me off too, though. We're
right.
not children. When you're a kid and you come in and you're like, oh yeah, well he did that to me. That's not how it doesn't matter. If Von Miller was offsides, the answer should not be get more calls wrong. So if Von was offsides and it should have been called, then great, let's call more. But then people will say, well, we don't want the refs to take over the games. It's just the other part of it, I will fix all of officiating right here. All they have to do, hear me out, Roger Goodell and I are now buddies. Hear me out. All they have to do is start publishing the accuracy percentage of officials. We have learned as a society that a 65% completion percentage for a quarterback is very good. We've learned that a quarterback in college that completes 70% of his passes is going to be a Heisman candidate. Like, we've learned that. Over time, we would learn, oh, well, this official gets 82% of his calls right. Like, if they are judging it, which we know they are, if they are grading it, which we know they do, and if they are tracking every call, which we know they do, and they give them out to the teams in advance to study to know how they call, why not give the fans that information? So coming in, I know, oh, this is a good officiating crew. They call holding a lot, and they're about 80% accurate. Like, that would end all of this discourse.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because after the Browns game, which we'll talk about in a little bit, Myles Garrett came out and said, the officiating is a travesty right now. That's it. They won, and he was still upset. And he said basically kind of what you're talking about. Myles Garrett said, we as players get scrutinized for every single play we do. The officials deserve the same treatment. And I agree with him. I actually do. These players who get fined, 5 figures for socks too low or some dumb celebration, they're out on Front Street all the time. We're criticizing everything they do, but yet if the officials screw up, we rarely hear about it. Like, it's sometimes teams will leak out, yeah, the NFL told us they got a call wrong, which you're not supposed to do that, actually. And there should be more transparency here. Officiating, I hate this whole, I have for many years, I've always resisted quarterback play sucks, officiating sucks, they're biased, because that's just the lowest common denominator of NFL talk. So I always avoid it. But this season, it's become impossible to avoid. Quarterback play does stink. The officials have been bad. It's been a bad season. Here we are. We're talking about one of the games of the day, not Vikings Raiders. And what have we talked about this entire time? We haven't talked about Josh Allen being Superman. We haven't talked about the Chiefs issues. We're sitting here talking about officiating. And that is such a shame for the NFL that every week it seems to be this way. Whether we're talking about MVS not getting the pass interference call against Green Bay or whatever calls are missed on a game-by-game basis, NFL officiating is not getting better, and it's a real problem for the league.
So this game had 2 huge consequences in my mind. Number one, let's now acknowledge that Kansas City sits in the 3 seed as we sit right now in the NFL playoff picture. They are 2 games back of both Baltimore.
Well, assuming the Dolphins beat the Titans,
right,
which who knows in this crazy NFL. But
so, yeah. Right. So right now they're 2 games back of the Ravens and 2 games back of the Dolphins as it stands, presuming that the Dolphins win. You're correct. So that's number one, because remember, as we talk about all the time, Mahomes has never played a true playoff road game. This year, he would have to do that if their plan is to get to the Super Bowl. That's significant. The other part of it is, it feels like maybe the death of the Bills and Sean McDermott was a little overrated. Like, this feels like one of those moments that it quells a little bit of the conversation of Sean McDermott has lost this team and the Bills aren't very good. Because winning at Arrowhead against I don't care where the Chiefs are right now, that win at Arrowhead is substantial.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. I think most, I don't want to say smart, but attentive NFL observers and fans and all that, they knew the Bills story. It's a good football team that's got terribly unlucky in close games and just blown close games. Like, it's not all luck. When you're consistently losing close games, it's more than just, hey, you're unlucky and the coin flipped on the wrong side the whole time. No, there's reason for that. So they own some of that, but at the same time, I think everybody knew this Bills team is very good, but the math to get to the playoffs was very tough. And it honestly still is. Just because they won today, they're 7-6. They play the Cowboys next. They could beat the Cowboys, but if they don't, they're back to 7-7. They finish with the Dolphins. There's still a long road for them, and you're probably going to need to get to 10 wins. We've seen Cleveland playing really well. We've seen Cincinnati playing really well. Just because the Bills won today doesn't mean necessarily, everything's fine, they're going to make the playoffs. Still a long way to go. They're probably going to have to pull off at least one more upset like this, but they can. I think that first of all, you had to win this game or you're pretty much just drawing dead at that point. But they also showed, again, they have the talent to beat teams like the Chiefs, maybe the Cowboys next week, maybe the Dolphins. Very important. The Chiefs side of it, this is just a weird season for them because the defense finally shows up and the offense just isn't there. They were stuck. They almost got shut out in the first half. CBS flashed a graphic that it was Andy Reid's 102nd home game, I believe, as Chiefs coach. They'd only been shut out in the first half one time, and that was 2018 AFC Championship game against the Patriots. They were in danger of doing that and scored like a minute and a half to go. They only put up 17 points. And it was weird. At the end of the game, when they got the ball back, you always have this Mahomes has the ball. This might be over. I felt that way at the Super Bowl. As soon as the Eagles scored the tie with the 2-pointer, I was like, looked up at the scoreboard and was like, Mahomes has too much time. He's going to win this game. I didn't feel that way today. I was like, I don't think this offense can do it. I just don't. Like, they started really well, and obviously the play got taken off the board, but it's a different Chiefs team, man. Not just 2 games behind, which puts you in a big hole. They do have an easy schedule the rest of the way, so maybe they can make that up, but I just don't have the feeling about this Chiefs team like I have the past 5 years of the Mahomes era.
I think you're right, though, because points have been at a premium at times, and that's really hard to figure out when you have such a great quarterback and such a great offensive mind, right? Like we acknowledge all that all the time, but it just doesn't, it's not locked up. It's not in sync at this point. And I don't know that that's going to fix itself. Like, it feels like we are at the spot at this point in the season. We spent so much time saying, who are these teams, right? Like, we are at the spot where the fatal flaws of many of these teams are not really fixable. They're not suddenly going to find a wide receiver that can hold on to the football. Kelsey it's just off. It's just off over the course of the last few weeks, so everything with the offense feels a little out of sync. And even when their defense comes to play, they don't get what they want out of it. To your point, by the way, I just confirmed it. I looked back on the standings. The Bills did not change at all in the AFC. They're still the 11th team. Right, wow. There's no change to the standings. So, you think about what that means, and that's the hole that they've dug for themselves. They are going to need help. One of the teams that they would need help, they need to turn around and beat in this process is Dallas that you mentioned. And let's be real, Dallas may have tonight cemented at least their conversation of being the number 2 team in the entire NFL. I mean, they didn't just beat the Eagles. They embarrassed the Eagles. 33-13. It felt like Dallas was more explosive. It felt like Dallas pushed around Philly often. It felt like Dallas was able to carve up, and I expected it against that secondary. It just felt like things were easy for Dallas. And that to me is still stunning when you think about what we've seen from Philadelphia. This is not last year's Eagles.
I think that if you go back to the end of the first quarter against San Francisco, the Eagles have played 7 terrible quarters. I mean, they just look overmatched, which is crazy for a team that talented. That was 10-1 just 8 days ago. That we're talking about. That game was never in doubt. Like, the Cowboys just blasted them. They were much better. Nobody watching that game comes out of that game and says, yeah, the Eagles are the better team. They just had a bad day. No, you just say the Cowboys are the better team. I don't know how you can make the argument otherwise. It doesn't mean the Eagles can't win again. And here's the thing about the Eagles, real quick, to get the nerdery stuff out of the way. The Eagles are still in great shape to win the NFC East. The remaining schedule is really, really easy, including 2 games against the Giants. And the Cowboys cannot win the division unless the Eagles lose one more game. The Eagles need to lose a 4th game to open up the door for the Cowboys. Eagles win out their NFC East champs. So they're still in good shape with the NFC East. They don't play one more team with a winning record. Best team they play left is Seattle, who's 6-7 right now. So everything still lines up pretty well for the Eagles, even to get the number 1 seed. The 49ers might have to win out to get that thing. But you look at how the Eagles are playing, and it's troubling. In what way were they better than the Dallas Cowboys tonight? It was startling. And all credit to the Cowboys. Like, that's a good. We talked about analytics and what we know now. Like 20 years ago, nobody would have questioned how good the Eagles were at 10-1. We would have just said, "Oh, they're 10-1. They must be awesome." In this analytics age, we kind of know the Eagles. This wasn't sustainable. All these close losses, the point differential we've heard about that's really lackluster. All these advanced stats really told us that the Eagles they're the best record in football, but they're far from the best team. And I think that's manifested itself these last 2 games where they just have not looked on the same level as the 49ers and the Cowboys. And I think we talked about this last week, and I kind of said, the Eagles last week, you went to bed saying, if the 49ers played that game against us, we can't beat them. And I think they kind of say that about the Cowboys tonight. Like, it's now all of a sudden it might be even a crisis of confidence for the Eagles, to the point of, are we really that team that could go on the road and beat the 49ers and hold off the Cowboys for the NFC East, or even beat them if we have a playoff rematch? I think the Eagles are in a little bit of trouble here. There's a lot to be fixed.
I think the other side of it from the Cowboys, though, is that we talk so much, and maybe it's on my mind because Saturday was the Heisman, but we talk about Heisman moments, like that big game that you remember. This just felt like one of those MVP type games for Dak. He had some throws in this game that were just, nobody but his guy had a shot at it, and it was gorgeous to watch. I mean, there was a control to the way that Dak played the quarterback position tonight. I felt like that was watching somebody that is one of the best be one of the best. His stat line, 24, 39, 271, 2 touchdowns. That's good. It's good, but I don't think it paints the picture to how good he was in this game.
To that point, when you're reading a stat line, I'm like, that's it? Because it looked way better. I mean, only thing I'll say, let's get into the nerdery stuff again. We talk about MVP. the last 10 have been quarterbacks from the number 1 or number 2 seed. We already talked about that the Eagles are still in great shape to get the NFC East. Would voters vote for Dak as a 5th seed quarterback? It would go against a decade. It's been a really long time. I think it was 2008. Peyton Manning was the last quarterback not to be a 1 or 2 seed to win MVP.
That's a great nugget by you, by the way. Look at
I do some research here and there, man. When I'm on my off time, this is what I do: I study MVP voting trends. But no, so the question with Dak is: would voters give him MVP if he doesn't win the NFC East? History says no, and that's why I think Brock Purdy's going to end up winning it. Different conversation altogether. But the way Dak is playing, I have no problem with anybody voting him MVP. He is on a heater right now. There was a throw, I believe it was fourth quarter, where he's kind of like, it looked like a wild, crazy throw, kind of off his back foot that he lofted down the sideline to Gallup. And you could tell like halfway down, you're like, oh my God, he's going to complete this. And it just fell right in a bucket. It was like, that is just Steph Curry from the logo right there. He is playing at that type of level. Hats off to Dak and this Cowboys team. Also, real quick, I think you overlooked a little bit. Mike McCarthy had his appendix taken out on Wednesday. I know he wasn't tackling Jalen Hurts out there or anything. That dude was on the sideline. He got back to practice on Friday. He is having a heck of a season. We've not talked about him as Coach of the Year at all, but he probably deserves it because how many jokes did we make? I made some this offseason about, Mike McCarthy's calling plays. They're screwed. No, they score more points than anybody else in the NFL and look really good doing it.
Yeah, I think when you look at the explosion of their weapons, the way that their offense is running, how they're getting guys open, it's fair in a world where we turn around and give so much credit to Andy Reid for how he gets guys open. Typically, it's fair to give that same credit to McCarthy. And there was a really key moment at the end of the game on the sideline. And it was just the congratulatory, hey, everything's fine. But like Dak and McCarthy were having a very real human interactive moment. And there was so much joy between them. And I just looked at that and thought, man, there's a connection there. And sometimes to me, that's the thing that we forget to value. Like when there's a true connection between quarterback and coach and they're on the same page and they feel each other and it's got that right vibe, like it takes everything to another level. I think part of the reason we're seeing this is not just because Dak is great this year and McCarthy's great this year. It's that the two of them obviously really trust each other. And that you can feel that in the way their relationship unfolded on the sidelines, but also in the way the game unfolds.
No, I like that observation a lot. Real quick, I think those two probably bond a little bit over getting dumped on when they really probably don't deserve it too much. Like if you're talking about the most like criticized dudes in the NFL who might not deserve as much criticism as they get, number 1 and number 2 might be Dak and Mike McCarthy in some order. Like it's crazy with them.
I will criticize my Uber driver today, though, that was taking me over to Allegiant because he's a Cowboys fan. And so we get in the car and immediately just like he's got the game on and he starts just talking to me about the game. And I want to say I was right. I was like, hey, I think the Cowboys win big in this game. I feel pretty good about that. Had a little cash on it. And he's like, well, that's why we're going to win the division. And I said, well, hold on. Like the rest of the schedule looks pretty easy. Then he went on a 20-minute like dissertation about how, the Giants hate the Eagles so much that it is pretty clear that they're going to bring the thunder of the gods to the Eagles. They'll be able to win those games against Philly. And then I was like, yeah, but y'all have to play like, and I don't have it in front of me, but they've got to play the Lions. They've got to play the Dolphins. They've got to play the Bills. And he's like, well, the Bills aren't who they used to be. The Dolphins never beat anybody that's any good and the Lions are free falling. And I'm like, so wait a minute. The Giants are going to pull it all together to beat the Eagles.
Tommy DeVito, hey.
So, yeah, I love that level of passion. I don't know what it's like to still have it for my team this late in the season. Like I appreciate it so much. Speaking of the Lions, what the hell do we do with Detroit now?
My goodness. What has happened, Fitz? This team 4 weeks ago, I'm like, yeah, they could win a Super Bowl. Like I was like, I don't have any money on it. Let's put it that way. But I was like, yeah, in the right scenario, they could. They've had 4 bad games in a row. They should have lost to the Bears the first time around. They got blasted by the Packers on Thanksgiving. They barely hung on against the Saints after building a 21-zip lead. I still talk myself into, no, the Lions are fine. They're going to go. Bears aren't very good. They're going to win this game. They got completely outplayed. Like, Jared Goff is just come back to earth. Amon-Ra St. Brown's not making the type of plays he used to. The running game's good, but I just don't think there's that kind of pop from it. And the defense just lost. Like the defense, which was really good when they were building up this great start, has just kind of faded away and looked like last year's defense. I don't know what to make of them, man. Where are you at with the Lions? Because right now I'm like, I know they're going to win that division. I think. I mean, whatever. But they don't look like a type of team that could win a playoff game, and that's so sad because I was totally into this Lions story.
I am out on the Lions, and I feel stupid. Like, because I sat here and said, look, their schedule is so easy. Yeah. Like, the schedule is so easy. They're going to get the first overall seed. They're going to have home playoff games in Detroit. Like, I did the math, and the math made sense to me. But now, this is what we have to do sometimes. Like, and when you get later in the season and you look back at things, you have to reshape it, right? So, if you just look back after, like, go all the way back to the Ravens game, because you mentioned some of this, but I want to dig a little deeper. The Ravens kicked their ass, right? And we looked at that and said, okay, well, that's just one thing. The following
this is
week,
the Ravens. They do that to a bunch of teams. Yeah.
The following week, they get the Raiders, a game that they won, but was a little closer than I thought it would be in that moment. But it's fine. You know, okay, they won. That's all that matters. Then they eke out a win against a bad Chargers team that you look there and say, man, it didn't look right, but it's fine.
Yeah,
then they get that
win. Yeah, they can put up points, I guess.
You get the win against the Bears. Same thing. It's like it was an ugly win. And you're like, it's fine. They lose to Jordan Love. Then they have the huge lead against the Saints, and they almost give it back. Like, if you look back at this stretch, objectively, the Lions are not good enough. Like, they are.
Like, you're looking at their schedule. When's the last time the Lions played a, wow, that's a really good team performance?
They beat the Panthers 42-24. Like that, we got to go that far back.
Okay, who hasn't beaten the Panthers by 18 points these days? Like, I mean, it's a little scary right now because I've bought into. I was like this, and probably because of the story. I want the Lions to be good. I think that fan base deserves it. I think it'd be great for the NFL if the Lions made a run. So maybe my heart took over there, and I really just wanted to believe this Lions team was as good as it looks on its best days. That win back against the Packers in week 3 or whatever it was on Thursday night, they look great. I mean, they look legitimately like, hey, this team could win a Super Bowl. They beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead. But it's been a long time since we've seen that Lions team. They're kind of in free fall right now. Not in that they're going to miss a playoffs or not win a division, because I think they still will. But just as far as how you look and how you're finishing the season, it is not good.
Well, they have a 2-game lead right now over the Vikings. And we just mentioned the fact that the Vikings are not, objectively, the Vikings are just not good right now. But it is at least a challenge for them when you look at the rest of the schedule.
And the Packers could pull within 2 games too, by the way.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah,
so
100%.
The Packers are the team that might be able to track them down, but we'll see.
No, I like that Packers call, though, because the Broncos, the way they're playing right now, we'll get to them in a minute. Like the Broncos, I'm sure are favored at this point. They have the Cowboys in Dallas they'll have to take on. That's going to be tough. And then they have 2 games against the Vikings. So those 2 games against the Vikings, if you deserve to win your division, you will figure out a way to win it. But then, like, the other part of the conversation is, like, when you start to stack them up against the rest of the NFC, there is a clear line in the sand. Like the 49ers are the current 1 seed in the NFC. They are great. The Cowboys are the current 2 seed. We've already established they are great. After that, the moat that exists between the Cowboys and then the Lions, the Bucks, the Eagles, the Vikings, the Packers, those are a bunch of teams that, you know, right now at best are meh. Like, so that to me is like, that's the difference. The Lions went from being in this conversation where, ooh, do they belong, to, man, is Jared Goff does he suck now? Like, is that what we're supposed to do with this? Because if he plays, he is a turnover machine. And if he doesn't fix that, they can't win.
You're 100% right in that the difference with them now is a month ago or whatever, we were like, they're in that bin with the 49ers, Cowboys, and Eagles. Now we're like, no, they're in that bin with the Vikings, the Packers, the Falcons, the Saints, like just the second-tier teams. I don't know any other way around it. Like, this is just, and you talked about that, like you're like, all right, they have 2 games against the Vikings, and you should be like, okay, the Lions are going to beat the Vikings twice. But if you lose like you just did to the Bears, don't guarantee you're beating the Vikings. Not either time. Like, look, I know we'll talk about Monday Night Football. I do think the Packers are in a real letdown spot tomorrow night. But if they win that game, or 2 back, all of a sudden their schedule is Charmin soft the rest of the way. They might start thinking, we could hunt these guys down. Like, they're not good. They don't scare us for sure.
So give me this. Right, just off the top of your head. Give me your best team in the NFC right now.
Easily 49ers.
Okay, we agree on that, no doubt.
Yeah.
Give me your best team in the AFC right now.
I think it's Baltimore, but even, oh man, I think you're leading into that game, and there's some questions about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Right now, I feel like Baltimore and San Francisco are our best teams, but I don't know how I truly feel about any of that, right? Like, because yes, and I wasn't doing it specifically to lead us into Baltimore, but let's go there for a second, because the Rams I mean, it is astounding to me. For anyone that didn't see the game, Baltimore wins 37-31 in overtime in the rarest type of win that you can get in overtime. Not that it was a touchdown, but that it was a punt return for a touchdown that gave them the extra the 6-point win, right? So it wasn't some big Lamar moment. It was a special teams moment that made it happen. Baltimore pulls out the 37-31 win in a game where the Ravens, it felt like the Rams were defensively disruptive to everything Baltimore was trying to do. They still put up 37 points, but it just was, I didn't walk away from that saying, oh yeah, Baltimore, Super Bowl.
Right, and that's the problem. I mean, they have had letdowns, and this is a game that, look, I'll give the Rams a lot of credit. Matthew Stafford is just playing really good ball. I don't think he's going to get fully the credit he deserves because they're 6-7. He missed a couple weeks. But man, he's playing well, and he played really, really well today. And they're just well coached. Sean McVay is showing, hey, remember me, I'm a great coach. This Rams team has no business probably being 6-6 going into that game today and almost beating the Ravens. But they did. But I think Lamar's moment was late in the fourth quarter. They needed a drive to take a lead at that point. He hit Zay Flowers for a touchdown, 2-point conversion. The Rams tied it after that. But I thought that was the Lamar moment of, he had 316 yards. I believe he had 3 touchdowns. I thought he played well today. Not great, not as great. It's almost like the opposite of Dak, where like that's all he did. Where I looked at Lamar's stat line, I'm like, 316, really? I didn't really realize that. He played, this Ravens game was like, hey, you won, move on, great, because you still got a ton of important games left for that number 1 seed. You need to win these games because there's not a lot of easy wins left for the Ravens, but it wasn't like whoa, the Ravens are going to a Super Bowl. I think the AFC really is wide open. I think we agree on that, don't we?
Yeah, no, the AFC feels incredibly open. I don't understand exactly what the rushing attack is for Baltimore right now, other than, using Lamar and interest. Like Keaton Mitchell had another one of, I'm going to call this a Keaton Mitchell day because it's what he does. 9 carries for 54 yards sounds really good, but 27 of it came on 1 carry. It feels like every Keaton Mitchell game is really just there's a massive explosive. How did he do that great run? And then the rest of the time, it's just kind of running up against the wall. Like Gus Edwards, 6 rushes for 15 yards. Like it just never felt like they got the running game going, which obviously is difficult when you're taking on certain portions of the Rams defensively. And the Rams also had a couple of sacks, a couple of tackles for loss, but it felt like they were more disruptive. It felt like the pocket was constantly moving for Baltimore in this game. And that was what surprised me a little bit through the course. Like I was looking for a more dominant performance from everybody not named Lamar.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. But I mean, again, in this NFL where it's so hard to just win games, I guess I tip my cap. But yeah, the Ravens are hard. They're a hard team to figure out right now. Like you said, where's the rushing attack? It just doesn't seem like, probably because of Keaton Mitchell, like you talked about, his inconsistency, they're not just willing to commit to, all right, we're going to give you 15 carries. We're going to give you 17 carries. Let's see what we can do with that. I think they should. I think they got to try because, like you said, Gus Edwards, who I think is a pretty good player, 6 of 15 is kind of Gus Edwards. Like, I don't think that he could be your bell cow. I think you need to see what you got with Keaton Mitchell. It can't be the whole Lamar show. I mean, dropping back 40, 50 times a game. Like, I don't know that's the formula you want, but they're kind of trying to get by with that. Just a Ravens team that's good, but with a lot of questions.
Think about this. I mean, I watched Cooper Kupp 3 or 4 times just double move somebody right out of their shorts, right? Like Cooper Kupp had a big game. Nakua had a big game too. If Kupp and Nakua are doing that to you, what's Tyreek going to do to you in the playoffs? Like I know the Dolphins don't get a lot of love for beating good teams, but my God, like they're if you are one of these wide receiver dominant teams, you're salivating a little bit at some of what the Ravens let get on tape right there, because it didn't feel like a great effort from them trying to shut down what they knew the Rams were going to offer them. But that big win on there. Also, while we're talking about contenders that took an L or didn't look as good, I would add Jacksonville into the world of weird into this conversation. Joe Flacco is, I mean,
what a story. I wrote this, the Browns beat the Jaguars. That's where we're going with this. I wrote for winners and losers. Just this NFL season has been very choppy, very hard to find great stories. This Joe Flacco story is unbelievable. Like, I think it was 3 weeks ago, people were posting on Twitter, formerly Twitter X, Joe Flacco's on my Southwest flight. Like, he's coming to Cleveland, I guess. Joe Flacco had spent the entire offseason unsigned. He was 38 years old. He was terrible last year with the Jets. It just looked like he was done. And that's how NFL careers usually end, where a guy just fades away, and you just don't realize they're gone. Like until you're like, whoa! My buddy brought up T.Y. Hilton to me today. I hadn't thought about T.Y. Hilton in 5 years. I'm like, what happened? There's a million guys like that. And Joe Flacco is going to be one of those guys who you're like, oh yeah, Joe Flacco. What was the last time he played? And he gets the call from the Browns, who are absolutely desperate. And I was like, I think we talked about it where I was just like, this ain't going to work out. Joe Flacco's 38. Like, he's the Tin Man right now. He needs some oil for this ain't going to. But I was like, wow, he looked pretty good against the Rams. And then today he was awesome. And you could just tell, even through the TV, you could tell Joe Flacco's excited to be there. He had a quote last week which basically said, you get this taste of football and you don't want to let it go. You don't want to. And it seems like a guy who knows, maybe this is my last chance. He's going to go from November 15th or whenever it was on his couch to starting a playoff game, I believe. I think the Browns team's going to the playoffs. I think Joe Flacco, weird as this sounds to say, I think he's going to be a pretty big reason for that.
Well, the staggering part about it is what I'm trying not to do is do what I've done to every other quarterback that's come in and had a little success. Because we've seen a lot of guys come in this year and have a little bit of Josh Dobbs, right? But Flacco hits different for me because there is such an element of been there, done that. He is a proven entity that we've seen play at least a certain level in certain situations. And also, there isn't going to be a moment that's too big for a guy that's won a Super Bowl. Like, he won a Super Bowl when all of his money was on the line. Like, that's always the part of the Super Bowl we forget. Like, he won a Super Bowl in a negotiation year. When you know that like generational wealth will change based on how you play and you still handle that pressure just fine, there's nothing that the Browns are going to face that he can't face. That's why it's a little different than the next game we'll get to with Jake Browning, for example. Like, so I think there is this Flacco moment where what we're seeing here is if you can just have pretty good quarterback play that competently knows how to read a defense, that competently knows how to use the weapons that are there. Yeah, and the Browns are a talented roster. Yeah,
and that was what I was just going to say. The difference between him and Dobbs or whoever we're going to compare him to is those guys, they kind of need magic from a lot of those guys. The Browns don't need magic for Joe Flacco. He's great today. I think he threw for 311, somewhere in there, 3 touchdowns. They don't need that from him every week. If he has an off game, they still got that defense. They just need Joe Flacco to not screw this up. It's kind of almost like, in a way, like what the 2011 Ravens were, right? Like 2012 Ravens, I'm sorry. Like, Joe, just do your thing, make a few plays. Our defense is here. That's our foundation of our team. Just be good enough. Keep the chains moving. And he could do that, I think, more than DTR could, obviously more than PJ Walker could. He's kind of this steadying force. He's not going to throw for 300 yards very often, but he will be good for that team. And I think exactly what they need right now, just this steady veteran presence.
Smartest thing they could do is just keep him around for as long as he's willing to stay around too, because Deshaun's never going to be, you don't know how healthy he's going to be. So having Flacco there has been absolutely incredible. And like I said, his experience makes him different than Jake Browning, who has been this remarkable story for the Bengals. The Bengals get a 34-14 win. Two sides of this to me. One, the wheels have fallen off for the Colts. I think we can agree on that. At some point, the injuries are just too much. They can't power through them. They're a shell of what they need to be. No Jonathan Taylor still. I have a hard time finding the way that Indy gets things back on track. But I really do have to tip my cap to Zach Taylor, the head coach of the Bengals. I've been tough on him over the years for just sort of rolling whoever out at quarterback there and saying, hey, just try not to get killed. But that's been his all. We'll throw the ball 70 times. Doesn't matter if you're getting hit. But he has absolutely dialed in comfort for Jake Browning out of the gates, which is stunning to me. I did not expect this at all. So Jake Browning comes in and just is part of a dominant performance for the Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, I'll push back on the Colts a little bit. I think the Colts are, yes, they need Jonathan Taylor back. They're missing a few guys. I still think there's a very well-coached team that can be competitive, but we kind of forget they're probably out in front of their skis a little bit at 7-5. So this performance didn't shock me at all. What is shocked me is Jake Browning, because I was like, okay, their season's over. I think everybody thought that. If you thought, oh, Jake Browning's going to lead them to the playoffs, okay, good call, because I didn't see it coming. It took this dude 4 years just to take a snap in the NFL. Like, he undrafted out of Washington. Nobody would give him a shot. He went to team, practice squad to practice squad, never took a snap before week 1 this year. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, Jake, okay, do what you can. And, against Pittsburgh, he looked okay. I was like, maybe. And then Jacksonville, he's just awesome. And then I was like, okay, but this is kind of the fork of the road, right? All right, you have one good game, and maybe Matt Flynn, so many years ago, and then you fall back to earth. But I kind of I watched him on Monday and I was like, I think this is sustainable. And it certainly was. He looked good again. Bengals look good again. I think they're all rallying around him and playing really well as a team. Getting T. Higgins back is huge. And I didn't expect to be saying this, 7-8 days ago before they played Jacksonville. I think this Bengals team's easily going to the playoffs. I think they're one of the 7 best teams right now because Jake Browning's playing really good football.
By the way, T. Higgins is going to get paid, and I'm all in for that. He deserves all the shine he can get. Let me look at the standings right now. The Bengals are at 7-6 and sit currently in the on the bubble section, according to NFL.com. They have them at the 10. But let's keep in mind that right now, if you're talking about 7-6, the Steelers, Colts, Texans, Broncos, Bengals, Bills are all 7-6.
And listen to all those teams. There's some teams in there where you're like, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. They're probably not going to make it. Whereas the Bengals, I look as crazy as, again, Fitz, I did not expect to be saying this about Jake Browning. I kind of see the Bengals as a team on the rise a little bit in that race. Like, I think this team is rallying. I think they're kind of, obviously you don't want to lose Joe Burrow. He's one of the 5 best quarterbacks on the planet. But I think that they're accepting the challenge of, hey, Jake is good enough. We want to win for this guy. They almost feel like a little invigorated having to play for the backup quarterback.
I will yet again throw the shade that I like to throw every time we see this happen and remind the world that if the Bengals can stay in the playoff race without Joe Burrow, maybe we can stop making excuses for the Jets, who did get a very big win today. I understand that. Zach Wilson is like every bad relationship you've ever had in your life. You go back and you realize that like there's a moment where you're dating somebody and you realize they're crazy and they're terrible for you. And then you bump into them somewhere on the street and you're like, oh yeah, let's grab a cup of coffee. And by the end of the coffee, you're like, I don't know, I kind of miss her. Like, I think I should call her. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, you're like, how am I back into this relationship with her? I know she's crazy and I know we're bad for each other. This is exactly what happens because Zach Wilson goes 27-36 for 301 with 2 touchdowns. You could argue today was his best day as a pro. He carved up the Texans, a 30-6 win for the Jets. There's some consequence for the Texans I want to get to in a second, but I also want to say, like, I think these are the moments that if you're a Jets fan, you're looking at it like this is the worst thing that could happen because it gives you hope that Zach Wilson's going to work out. And it just isn't. This isn't ever going to work out between this player and this team. So it's unfortunate because this just keeps everybody tied just enough where they feel like there's going to be some future for them together.
Yeah, I agree with you. But just good on Zach. I mean, how embarrassing it must have been for him to get benched. I watched Tim Boyle try to play quarterback. So for him to come back, rebound, I thought he did play well. Like, do I think it's sustainable? Not really. I need to see it a couple more times. But I think overall, it was the best I've seen Zach Wilson look, aside from that, like, quarter and a half against the Chiefs when everybody lost their mind. He was making the throws. He was moving that team. 301 yards. Like, the Texans have not been that bad this year. I'm not saying they're lighting the world on fire in defense, but pretty impressive showing by Zach Wilson and the Jets as a whole.
Yeah, they get a big win. Most importantly for the Texans, C.J. Stroud took a violent hit where his head bounced off the ground. I shouldn't have to say this, but in today's world, we have to. Most important is his health. Like, whatever it takes to make sure that his brain is good, that his head is good, that everything, that whatever protocol he needs to be in, he needs to be in. It just looked violent. And so this is one of those moments where if you're the Texans, you got a young quarterback that is your future. You just have to be measured in your approach getting him back on the field.
No, I mean, he was down for a while. Quinnen Williams kind of defended the hit after, saying, I'm not dirty. This guy's an elite quarterback. I don't wish harm on anybody. I hope he's fine. I didn't really think it was a
I didn't think it was dirty
hit.
At all.
It's just football. Like, it's just going to happen. His head hit pretty hard on the ground. And I think here's the point you were making. You get to Saturday, maybe. Let's say they get to Saturday and C.J. Stroud has cleared concussion protocol. What do you do? If this Texans team was 4-9, I think it's pretty easy. No, you're sitting for a couple of weeks. We're making sure about this, but they're 7-6. They're all of a sudden in this wild card race. I think it's going to be really tough for that organization. And then make no mistake, this is an organizational decision. This this guy is a future MVP at quarterback. We're not messing around with this. And all of a sudden you're Tua Tagovailoa having multiple concussions in a year. What do you do if he's cleared on Saturday and you're trying to stay in this wild card race, but you're like, what do we do with our, this guy's our whole future. He looks so good. Do we risk it? I don't know if you get to that point, what you do. It's going to be a very, very challenging couple weeks for the Texans coming up here, figuring out what is right for the wild card race, what is right for CJ Stroud. They're going to be juggling all this. And I, as with most things in life, I don't know the right answer. There's a lot of nuance here.
And they have some winnable games ahead of them. I mean, they have the Titans up next to, they should be able to beat. And then after the Titans, it gets a little bit tough. I mean, I think at this point they get Titans, then Browns, who we were just complimenting. So I think that's tough. But then they get Titans again and Colts. So again, you're going to win your way into the playoffs if you deserve to be there. That's just, they're going to have to be really careful here. It looked bad. And I know concussions are just part of the NFL. Frankly, if he's cleared, then I'm sure, the medical staff wouldn't clear him unless they're comfortable with it. I hear all of that. Just when you see a head bounce off the ground that way and you see how shook he was afterwards, man, it's just it's a reminder. They're so far ahead of schedule. I want them to take advantage of the opportunity, but my God, first and foremost, he needs to be okay. Speaking of just quarterbacks in general, we had a little bit of up and down play in the New Orleans Carolina game. We get a 28-6 win. Derek Carr playing with, according to reports, broken rib cartilage. I didn't know you could have broken rib cartilage, but that sounds immensely painful. New Orleans gets a 28-6 win in a game that they were up 14-6, late third, early fourth. Like, it was a closer game than the final score gave it. They pulled away at the end, so I'm not totally surprised by that, but it creates this little cluster because we're about to get to that division as a whole. 28-6 was an important win for the Saints as they try and maintain the NFC South race.
Yeah, it was one of those games, a typical game for the Saints where you come away completely unimpressed and just like, why is this team not better? But the Panthers are just worse. Like, the Panthers are a bad football team. And I don't know, man, at some point we're going to have an honest conversation about Bryce Young. He was, in the first half today, he was 3-15 for 29 yards. And right at the end of the first half, I think it was less than 10 seconds left, they call a perfect route for Jonathan Mingo, who blows past everybody on a post route. And he is wide open in NFL terms for a touchdown. And Bryce missed him badly. He overthrew him so bad. And it was like, if you're taking one play to sum up Bryce Young's rookie year, that might be it. And the thing about Bryce that concerns me a lot, actually, other quarterbacks who struggled as a rookie, we expected. I do too. Hey, this is tough to do. You're being put into the fire. Not everybody's going to be CJ Stroud or Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow or Cam Newton, right? This is supposed to be tough. But almost all of those quarterbacks who went on to be good, their rookie year, there was at least plays where you're like, oh, that's it. That's the first pick of the draft. That's why we drafted him. Now, maybe the full game isn't good, but wow, that throw, wow, that run, wow, that whatever. We have seen nothing like that for Bryce Young this year. His highlight film is incredibly short, let's say. You just don't see wow plays from him. If I dropped you into the NFL season in week 1 and said, just watch Panthers games, I'm not going to tell you who got drafted where. Watch number 9. I would say, where do you think he was drafted? You would never guess first pick. I'll tell you that. And that's what's concerning to me. We haven't seen him pop at all. It's not like he struggles a little bit, but he has some highlights. It's kind of just all bad. Or mediocre, at least. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes, which is good. That's a positive. But there's Bryce Young, the first pick.
There is no team in the league to me that is more doomed for the next 5 to 10 years in Carolina. They don't have a coach. They have no idea what the organization looks like. They have a quarterback that they traded a king's ransom to get, which means now they're in the situation that I don't remember ever seeing in my life, where you have the number 1 pick in next year's draft and you've already traded it away for somebody that may not be good enough. And when you look at the numbers, we just said numbers don't always tell the story. When you look at Bryce's numbers this week, 13 of 36 for 137 yards, an average of 3.8 yards per play. What are we talking about here? Because you're right. Usually when we see rookie quarterback struggles, it's because you're not throwing the ball where you should, or you're being too aggressive and the window's not there, or you're waiting for a guy to get too open. You're taking processing difficulty. All of these things we're used to. This is none of that. This just looks like a bad quarterback on a bad football team that doesn't have a lot of future. They don't have weapons because of the trade to acquire him. They don't have assets to make them better because of the trade to acquire him. And they are stuck now with the quarterback that I'm not sure has shown us anything in his rookie year that makes him deserving of having been the number 1 pick in the draft.
Correct. And when you go into the offseason, you want that positivity, you want that excitement, you want that optimism. The optimism for them is, well, look at his tape from Alabama, which is fair. Good player there. And also, we're going to make the situation around him better. Maybe that turns things around, and it's still early. I am not calling him a bust. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I want to see more from him where I can go into the offseason with more optimism than just, oh, yeah, remember Alabama? Like, that's all it is right now. And also, we're going to hire the right coach and go sign a receiver, whatever it is. There's not much other than that except kind of blind hope at this point for Bryce Young.
But this is what I say to you all the time, and I say to everybody, like, our job is to write a book report after every chapter. So we don't have the glory of getting to read the whole
every
book.
Every page almost.
Yeah, it's like, all right, we read a page. It was a good page. Here's a review. Like, that's what we do, right? And like, imagine going to a movie and you've sat through 2 hours of a movie and you're like, yeah, this thing sucks, but the last 30 minutes is great. I hope that the last 30 minutes of this turns into the most phenomenal. Like, I hope this is just a movie with a slow start. That's what I hope for Bryce Young. But I think it's also okay to acknowledge at this point that it has been a wildly slow start. And I don't know what fixes that, because they are not going to have, like, yes, they can go. And I was talking to a former NFL player today about T. Higgins. I mean, if you're T. Higgins and you're out there and you can play, you can pick anywhere you want to play next year, and you're going to get wildly paid by somebody to do it. Are you picking Bryce Young in Carolina? Really? You're not. They need weapons, but they're going to have to draft them because free agents aren't going to want to go to that situation. So, like, they're going to have to overpay. And even when they overpay, there will be better options that are also willing to overpay. Like, so that's why Carolina is wildly screwed. That being said, Tampa Bay, Atlanta, not screwed. There's now a 3-way tie for first in the NFC South. I mean, NFC South.
You really are. You're trying to sell that NFC South. Let's talk about those records, though. That 3-way tie.
I mean, that's the look. Tampa Bay gets a 29-25 plucky win. All right, it was a back and forth. It was a back and forth game. It was fun. It was entertaining. Maybe I was just jaded because I was watching just such a game in person. But 29-25 felt like a good game.
It was entertaining, and I thought really telling that, the Falcons score with, I believe, about 2:30 left in the game, and they take the lead, and it's like the Buccaneers season's on the line right there. They know, everybody knows. You lose the Falcons, you're 2 games behind them, and you lost a tiebreaker. You're not 3 games better than the Falcons the rest of the way. That's just not going to happen because you're not good enough to be 3 games better than anybody the rest of the way. So they have one drive to go save their season, and Baker Mayfield does it. Hats off to him. He drove them down, hit Kate Otten for the go-ahead touchdown. They fade the final few plays there and win the game. I thought it was a really gutsy performance by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Good win for them. And look, somebody's going to win this division, and it's going to make their season look a lot better than it was, like the Buccaneers last year. I will say this, Black Monday, whatever, whenever we get to all the coaches being fired, I really, truly think the 3 of the 4 coaches in the NFC South should be fired. Whoever doesn't win this division, you have had every opportunity. If Arthur Smith can't get it done, well, I don't know how you justify really a 4th year. What's the reason for that? We've already seen the Panthers get rid of their coach. They're already in the clubhouse, so to speak. And I think if Dennis Allen doesn't get this done with the Saints, you look at that talent on that roster and say, you couldn't win this division, really? I'm a little more lenient with Todd Bowles because I think it's been better than I figured. He's taken over. It was a tough post-Brady year, and he still has him competitive. Maybe Todd Bowles, if they don't win the division, he keeps his job for another year. But I'm telling you, I mean, if I'm an owner of one of these teams, I'm like, we couldn't win this division this year. There's no reason to see another year of this. Like, this is just kind of what it is.
You will never get better insight than we just gave you on this show. Somebody's got to win the division. That's it. There you go.
I wish NFL would change its rules. Like, no. Let's just a 7th wild card team. Whatever. We're just putting that one up for auction, basically. Now, NFC South spot goes up for auction. Now
that I have, we put everybody to sleep with games that sucked and teams that sucked. Can we just acknowledge? By the way, I almost take it for granted. San Francisco went out and took care of business against Seattle. Seattle, I thought at times in this game was really competitive. There were moments, especially given their quarterback situation. I thought Seattle played pretty well. But, man, I'm telling you, San Francisco just cooks. They make it look effortless every week.
I mean, Brock Purdy, career high in yards. I think it was 360-something. And when they get cooking like this, where it's like, usually it's like, I think we've talked about this. It's a Debo game this week, and next week's a Kittle game. It's when they get all those dudes going. I mean, Ayuk was awesome today. Kittle made some big plays. Debo is just the best player on the field, I thought. McCaffrey, obviously, he pops like a 70-yard run the first play of the game. He was awesome. When everybody's contributing like that, and Brock is just playing point guard, that offense is, how do you stop that? I have no idea how you stop that. And even in this game, like I thought Seattle, for not having Geno Smith, having to start Drew Lock because of the injury to Geno, they were competitive in this game. They battled pretty hard. They still lost by 12 points. Like, it's just the San Francisco team, I don't think they lose the rest of the season. I think they win every game through the Super Bowl. I just think that they're that good. This is a really, really good 49ers team on both sides of the ball. Incredibly impressive. I do think Purdy wins MVP just because of the 1-2 seed thing I talked about before. It's a really, really, really good 49ers team.
Think about this. I'll give you all of these numbers for a second. Let me be a stat geek for a second. San Francisco had 4 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, 5 quarterback hits, 7 passes defended on the defensive side of the ball. Then you look at the offensive side of the ball. To your point, Purdy, 19-27 for 368, which is a huge number off of that. Christian McCaffrey, 16 carries for $145. Debo, 7 catches for $149. Ayuk, 6 catches for $126. Kittle, 3 catches for 76. Why do I give all those numbers? It speaks to just explosive playmaking everywhere on both sides of the ball. Like they just beat you in so many ways. And when you've got Debo catching 7, Ayuk catching 6 in a game where Christian McCaffrey still got his 16 touches. Like, how? This is the wonder of what Shanahan has done with San Francisco, is that he makes sure everybody gets fed in a way that actually feeds the offense. And that's so difficult to do. We see so often offenses are just trying to jam the ball into somebody because they're trying to figure out a way to get it to their playmakers. Instead, this is just naturally watching somebody cook in a way that just gets everybody involved in the offense with flow and with rhythm. And then how do you stop it? I don't think anybody has an answer to how you stop the San Francisco offense when the offense is on.
No, I know. And I mean, we've talked about all these guys. And the funny part about it is, I'll still say this, I've said it before, the best player in our offense we haven't even mentioned is Trent Williams. He might be the greatest offensive tackle of all time. Like, that's how good the San Francisco team is. One real quick thing on the Seahawks, DK Metcalf got himself ejected late in the game, a little fracas at the end. I don't know, man. I don't think the NFL is going to suspend him. I hope they don't, but he has a history now, and DK's got to get his emotions under control. We've seen this way too often from him. This didn't hurt them in the game. The game was already decided by then, but it has hurt them in the past a little bit, and I like DK. I think he's a great player, but this is becoming an issue where he's a great player, plays a lot of fire, but he's got to get his emotions under control sometime. We saw another example of it today.
Yeah, that's a great point by you. We got one more game from the day's action that we have not gotten into, and it had huge ramifications for the rest of the year, because as we sit right now, I cannot believe this. I owe several people dinners after all the wrong bets I had. The Broncos are 1 game back of the AFC West lead. The Broncos look like the best team in the AFC West. They look the eye test. They look better than the Chiefs. And by the way, substantial, significant injury for Justin Herbert, who Ian Rappaport said will have an MRI tomorrow on his fractured right index finger to determine how long he's out and if he's able to return at all this season. So the wheels have now officially fallen off for the Chargers. And in the meantime, a team that was left for dead by me and everybody else not that long ago looks like they're just headed like a rocket ship to the playoffs like the Broncos are.
I mean, first with the Chargers, if you bring Justin Herbert back this season, what are you doing? Like, I get Brandon Staley's trying to keep his job. It ain't going to happen, though, Brandon. I think you're a dead man walking here. I wouldn't even be surprised if we have some news tomorrow morning. Like, let's be real. Like,
I thought they might wait till after Thursday because they'll play the Thursday night game against the Raiders. They get the minute by. They fire everybody.
Very hard to do before Thursday. But again, more 4th down decisions that just blow. They right away get a turnover in Denver territory as 4th and 3 from the 6. It's like early enough to take the 3 points. Nope, got to go for it. Like, when did taking 3 points become such a bad thing? I'm all about the go for it revolution. I think it's been great. I watch old games on YouTube all day while I work. It's crazy to watch a game from like 10 years ago and somebody's going for it on 4th and 1 at the opponent 39 and the announcers are like, oh my God, what a gamble. Like, no, it's not a gamble. I promise you it's not. I live in 2023. We do this all the time. And but I mean, Staley just has to go for it all the time. Just can't take the points. I think that's really biting him. And the Chargers are done. They're 5-8. Why would you risk Justin Herbert at this point? Let him sit. On your Broncos point, yeah, I don't know what's happened. I'm still at a loss. I get asked about it all the time. I'm obviously based out here in Colorado. And my answer is always, I don't know. It's a short emoji every time. I don't know what happened to the Broncos. I don't know how they went from legitimately being one of the worst teams of football, 1-4, They had a good game in their 5th loss against the Chiefs. They battled hard in that game. That's kind of the turning point. But before that, one of the worst teams in the NFL. Nothing really crazy happened. Like, they didn't get a big player back or make a trade, or they just became a good team overnight. And I don't really, honestly, truly remember the last time I saw that happen.
Well, their defense helped them in this one. They got 6 sacks in the of this game, 9 quarterback hits, which is incredible. And to the point of their offense, which it's really amazing, they won 24-7. When you look at their the receivers, Cortland Sutton had 3 catches for 62. After that, I mean, Samaje Perine had 5 catches. Like, they didn't really have anybody. Jerry Jeudy only had a couple of grabs. Like, there isn't this thing that I can pinpoint that's working for them offensively. It just works. Like, there's just no, like, they have found a way. They didn't run the ball particularly effectively in this game. They were okay. Running 31 carries, 106 yards, 3.4 yards a carry, and it kind of felt like that. Like, handing the ball off was sort of just an exercise of, okay, there we go, we're running it now. But so, like, there isn't this thing that I look and say, oh, that's what they do well. But right now, what they do well is they stick in every game. And speaking of stick, I know now we're all wildly excited for Easton Stick to take on Aiden O'Connell on Thursday Night Football. And what I cannot say this loudly enough, I think has potential to be the worst Thursday night football game in NFL history. So you're welcome, America, for that. Monday Night Football is going to be great. We got a doubleheader. Before we get out of here, I'm going to give you a bold prediction. You ready for a bold prediction? Then we'll each give a bold prediction here. My bold prediction for Monday Night Football is that knowing that the MVP race is there to be had, knowing history is there to be made, and knowing the importance of Monday Night Football, factor that with the fact that the Titans are terrible defensively in the secondary. I think Tyreek Hill is going to have a monster game because Mike McDaniel and Tua are going to make sure he gets fed throughout the course of this thing. I think 200 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. Tyreek is going to go off on a national platform in a way that only tries to make the MVP conversation even greater for Cheatham.
That'd be fun.
That's my bold prediction.
One of my fantasy teams that needs to get in the playoffs would appreciate 203. I hope that. I kind of teased it a little bit before. Can we burn this tape if it doesn't happen? Well, of course we can't, Stone. You can delete this. I think the Giants beat the Packers. I just think this is a flat spot for the Packers, who are riding the highest you could possibly ride. Like, they just beat the Chiefs. They're on top of the world. Jordan Love's never going to lose another game. They're going, like, I think if anything gets the Giants up right now, it's Monday. You're on Monday Night Football. Players still, that has value to players. Like, they like being on Monday Night Football. It's still a thing. I think the Giants get up for this game. I think the Packers come in a little fat and happy here. And I think the Giants beat the Green Bay Packers. As high as I bet on the Packers, I just think it's a flat spot for them.
I want to tell you that you've lost your damn mind. But if there's anything we've learned this year, it's that the NFL's drunk all year. So it would be the most 2023 NFL season thing for that exact result to happen. We'll see if we are right on our bold predictions. You will see them again. If we are wrong, we never said this, and we will deny it all. Like rule number 1, deny. All right, Charles McDonald, we cannot deny. He'll be back on Tuesday with the exempt list. I'm back on Wednesday, of course, hanging out with Charles Robinson, Jory Epstein for inside coverage. You never want to miss that. Also, you can leave us a voicemail. You can hang out, talk to us. Speakpipe.com/0blitz. That's speakpipe, one word, .com/0blitz. If it's a family-friendly good voicemail, especially complimentary, we might even play it. Follow us on social media. Frank is at Yahoo Schwab. I'm at Jason Fitz. Stone is at SJ Rochelle. He's our producer behind the glass doing God's work. Leave us that 5-star review. Rate, subscribe, tell your friends, your family, your enemies. Tell everybody to hang out with us. We are still going to keep cooking all the way through the end of the season. You can tell I'm still hungry because I've said keep cooking like 84 times. I just need some dessert to eat my feels after that terrible football game. We will see you next Sunday. Thanks for hanging out with us.